Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Humor in the C-Suite. My guest this week is Martin Perelmuter. He is an unapologetic idealist. He is passionate about people and ideas, and after 30 years in the speaking industry, believes more than ever that a great speech can provide the impetus for action and be a catalyst for change. Now, prior to co-founding Speaker Spotlight, Martin was a corporate lawyer at a prestigious international law firm. While he realized early on in his career that he needed to do something more entrepreneurial, he learned some valuable lessons and best practices there. Martin is the current president and serves on the board of governors of the International Association of Speakers Bureaus, whose membership is made up of speakers bureaus, lecture agencies, and speaker management companies located around the world. We had a great time chatting about how he uses humor to connect with both clients and speakers, but more importantly, how he uses humor to create an environment of inclusion. I can't wait for you to hear our conversation. We had so much fun. So please welcome Martin Perelmuter. Hi, Martin. Thank you for being my guest this week on Humor in the C-Suite.
Hey, Kate, good to be here.
You know what? I was so excited to have you on as a guest. First of all, because we've worked together for 18 years. It's been amazing. A long time. It is amazing.
Yeah.
And you are really the reason. That's good. I agree.
At least I think so.
Well, it's pretty incredible how much your company has grown and how much you're a part of the entire speaking industry. Because when I first started with you, you were in a basement, and I think there was 3 or 4 of you working there. And now and now you have so many people, who work for you. Not only that, Farah has another agency as well, which is a part of the Speaker Spotlight brand. And you've always created this sense of community within Speaker Spotlight. And I feel like you did a lot of that through a sense of humor. So I thought we'd just start off, and this is how I always start the episodes off, is do you have a favorite joke you like to tell?
Okay. So, you did warn me that you might ask me this, and so I had to give it some thought because I don't have one handy that someone's like, what's their favorite joke? So I started thinking about it, and I was thinking like, okay, who are my favorite comedians? And like, I love George Carlin, but I think my all-time favorite comedian is Mitch Hedberg, who a lot of people don't know who that is. But if you know, right? And Mitch Hedberg was amazing. Sadly, he's no longer around. But I saw him weirdly. I went to a taping of the Mike Bullard show, like when it first started, and it was a friend's birthday, and that's what they wanted to do. And Mitch Hedberg, no one had ever heard of him. I'd never heard of him. He was the comedian, and he walked on stage, and like at first I thought, this guy is completely like out of it, and this is going to be a train wreck. And within like 30 seconds, I realized like, oh my God, this man is a comedic genius. And I started following his career, and I love his stuff. So there's so many great Mitch Hedberg jokes. Like there's a lot of little throwaway one-liners, as you probably know. Like, I think he says like, I like rice. Rice is great when you're hungry and you want to eat like 2,000 of something. So jokes like that. But my favorite Mitch Hedberg joke is, and I'm not going to do it any justice, obviously. And you got to go on YouTube and watch Mitch Hedberg clips. He says that, he's walking by a dry cleaner at 3 a.m. and the sign said, sorry, we're closed. And he says, like, you don't have to be sorry. It's 3 a.m. You're a dry cleaner. It would be ridiculous for me to expect you to be open. I'm not going to walk in at 10 tomorrow morning and say, hey, man, I walked by at 3. You guys were closed. Somebody owes me an apology. And I don't know what it is. I just love that joke. I think it's like a lot of his stuff is just like everyday humor, things that you notice every day, whether it's signs or things that happen, and you don't even think about how ridiculous and funny they are, and he finds the humor in those. So I think he
really did. Did you ever see him with a stand-up bass player? He used to tour with a bass player. I saw him a few times, and he'd have a bass player behind him.
Oh, no way.
And he'd just be closing his eyes, telling his jokes. He was really magical. Yeah.
He was. Yeah. Sometimes I guess he had a lot of stage fright when he first started, and he would often wear dark glasses or sometimes even, I think, turn around and have his back to the audience. I heard when he first started, he would do half of his show not even facing the audience because he was so self-conscious. But he's amazing. And that's one of the beautiful things about YouTube is you can go and find all these old clips there. And In fact, I saw a speaker in the fall, and he was hilarious. I'd never heard of him before. I was at a conference, and afterwards, I was talking to him, and I said, have you ever heard of Mitch Hedberg? And he's like, oh my God, he's my favorite comedian. I said, well, your humor kind of reminded me. He said, that's the best compliment I've ever gotten. So, and there's a few other people standing around going, who's Mitch Hedberg? What are you talking about? So,
I know. And the
yeah,
fact that he was Canadian,
yeah.
right? And all that.
Was he Canadian? I think he. So
Well,
I
I
think
thought
he
he
was.
was,
I think
but
he was
maybe
from the
not.
northern U.S., like Minnesota. But I think his wife or his girlfriend
Wife
was
was
Canadian.
Canadian.
Yeah,
You are correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
And
I love one-liners as well.
yeah, yeah. He was amazing. So anyway, I hope I did it a little bit of justice.
I
If
love
you're listening
that.
to this, go watch it. Go watch YouTube clips, and you'll see how funny he is.
It's really a great way to start it off because that's, when we can appreciate those moments and those comedians. Like I love Stuart Francis, and
Mm,
he's a one-liner. He was Canadian, moved to England, but he
yes.
had one joke where he was like, "Do frisbees appear bigger the closer they get?" And then it hit me. It's like the dumbest joke, but it's so smart and so
Yeah,
silly.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think Rich Evers has. I think he says, "I like Kit Kats unless I'm with four or more people." So, makes
Yeah,
sense.
there you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, comedy, like the speaking industry has changed so much
Hmm.
since we started. Like I know when I started with you, there was no YouTube, there was no TED. Like literally if you wanted to hire a speaker or be a speaker, you went through a bureau.
Yeah.
So you were really a founder for the industry, I think, especially in this country, for me or
Thank
for a
you.
lot of people.
Hmm.
And so how do you use humor to create promote a healthy work culture, especially within your teams? And now that you're working remote, it's even.
Yeah. We are remote. Like I'm at home today. We've got an office that we have a work from anywhere policy. So on any given day, there's anywhere from 0 to maybe 15 or 20 people in the office, but often it's a small number. So we're usually remote now. Um, I think that the thing with humor to me, and in terms of like building a strong culture, just has to do with people being themselves and being comfortable being themselves. And I think that that's the biggest thing. Is like I think everybody has a sense of humor, right? Some people are funnier than others, some people are better at telling jokes or whatever, but everyone has a sense of humor, I think. And to me, what that means is like your ability to laugh, right? Like I always thought that that's what a sense of humor is. Like someone might be completely unfunny, but if they like appreciate humor or find the funny in things, they have a sense of humor, right? And so I think that given that, if people can relax and be themselves at work, and that might mean, telling a joke, it might mean just finding something funny in a serious situation or just an everyday situation, and they can share that, then that just kind of breaks down barriers. And I think, especially when we have new people joining the team, if we have a staff meeting or just we're working together in the office, and people see that it's okay to like you know to laugh at something, to find the humor in things, that's a great thing. And I used to, when we were all working together in one office, I used to find that when it got too quiet in the office, it would make me a little bit uneasy. Sometimes it's just because everybody was really hard at
Yeah.
work, right, and just like working. But sometimes I'd be walking through the office and it's like it's a little bit too quiet in here, what is going on? Whereas when you hear pockets of laughter or chatter in different parts of the office, like that to me is a good sign of a healthy culture and a healthy workplace. So
It
to
is
me, it's,
so
yeah.
true. Yeah. And being able to bring your authentic self to work, I think has changed a lot in, the business culture, especially over the last decade. Because it
Hmm.
used to be, everyone was sort of scared. I have my, home persona and my work persona.
Right.
And I think now you can just be yourself.
I think so. I think that the pandemic accelerated that a little bit because people, would be working from home, and their cat would jump on their desk, or a
Yes.
kid would go running behind them or something. And but that's something that we've always believed. Bryce, who's on our team, he's been working with us for, I'm going to say it's got to be more than 15 years now. 16, yeah, it's 16 years.
Wow.
And that was the thing that he once something he told me shortly after he started. And whenever we have a new person starting and we have our first sort of staff meeting, we often ask other members of the team, hey, is there anything you want to share with this person about working here that you think might be helpful? And Bryce always chimes in and says, when I started here, I felt like, I have my life. And then as soon as I cross that threshold and walk through the doors of the office, now I am, work Bryce. And then when I leave, I go back to being Bryce. And I realized really quickly that here, there shouldn't be a distinction between the two. And of course, you might be different the way you speak to a client on the phone than if you're speaking to your kids or your spouse or your friends or your mother or whoever. But it should be the same person. And, we've had our kids from time to time drop by the office. Jade, our daughter, actually worked in the office at one point. And I've always felt like if my kids see me at work, I should be completely recognizable to them. I should not be a different person than the person that they know. And I would think it'd be so weird if, like, someone you knew came to work and saw you, like, oh my God, you're a different person. So I think, that's something we've always believed in. And Bryce is a perfect example. Like, he's a funny guy when you get to know him, but I didn't actually know that when we hired him because he was very serious in the interview and everything, which was fine. But I'm glad that he and hopefully everyone feels comfortable just being themselves and having a laugh and sharing that with colleagues or clients or speakers. Like, it doesn't really matter, but we're all people, and I think we all want that comic relief sometimes.
Yeah, and it really does connect people. And I know just from, knowing some of your staff and working with agents there that you do a lot of team building days. Mm-hmm. And you guys have a lot of fun doing it. And do you find that really does bring people together?
It really does. We used to do, we had the trivia thing. We had all kinds of different things we do. And we got to be more deliberate about it now because we're not working in the same place and look for those opportunities. Yeah. But when you can, now what we do, because we work remote, is we have like a monthly dinner. That's totally voluntary, like no one's forced to go, but we usually get a really good turnout, and it gives everyone a chance to just get together, have a drink, have something to eat, and just talk. And it's like a lot, like the volume is high. Like, there's a lot of talk, a lot of laughter, and, it's not a work thing. We don't expect anyone to talk about work. We don't want people talking about work. It's just getting to know each other better as people and having some laughs. And that's like such an important, part of, building a team and a culture, is having those opportunities. And we've even, I was thinking about this earlier that, even a few years ago, a few people in the office created an entire sort of like a TV show, if you will, very low budget sort of thing about, there was an epidemic of missing forks in our office. And so whenever someone would go the forks all disappeared. So they did this entire script they wrote, and we all sort of had little roles to play, and they filmed it about the missing forks and all that. And then we have an offsite in the summer, and they played it, they edited it and played it, and it was so much fun. And so, anything like that is just a great way to just, again, build a stronger culture, a stronger team, get to know one another. And it just humanizes work more, which I think what most people hopefully want.
Well, the reason I know you guys are a great place to work is because no one leaves. Like, everyone has been there for so long, they're really invested in this place of work where it is a family now. That's how I feel, like, just speaking with everyone, I've really, and I find that when companies, really bond in the good times, when the bad times do come, they're even stronger in those situations.
I agree. We're the Hotel California of speaker bureaus. Right? You can check that anytime you want, but you can never leave. I stole that joke. I just saw an amazing comedian. First time I saw live comedy in a while, about a week ago, and there's a comedian named Alex Edelman, and he used that joke in a different context. So I stole that
great.
From Edelman. But when you said that, I just thought, yeah, we're kind of the Hotel California of speaker bureaus, maybe. Yeah, you know what? It gets you through, when times are good, it's easy, right? It's easy to be a great company, a great leader, a great manager. But it's when times are tough that you really, need that glue to stay together. And certainly, we've had our shares of ups and downs, and 2020 was, the toughest business-wise for us. And, it's, it's funny. A memory came up on social media lately, and it was like, remember in the early days of the pandemic when lots of companies were like putting like pictures of Zoom calls with the team and going like, team's hard at work. Like there's a lot of that I remember. And we
Yeah.
had one like that. And it was like, but it was, everybody was laughing. And it was, and this was like in probably March or early April of 2020. And the sort of caption was something to the effect of like, even during tough and stressful times, we're still able to have a moment and share a laugh. And I remember like, even in the toughest, darkest days of the pandemic, there were still moments of levity and times where we could, have that shared experience of having a laugh, and sharing that. So important,
It
especially
really
tough times.
is. Especially, yeah. There's always, and you know
Yeah.
what? Stuff is always going to happen. It's how we adapt and cope
Hmm.
with the stress it's causing. And when we can use
Yeah.
humor in those moments, I think it goes
100%.
way further. Have you found collaborating with other, I don't want to say speakers bureaus, but because now you're in charge of Speakers Association. Is it the IS?
IASB. Yeah, I'm not really in charge. I am the president,
You're the president,
for
but
this
you
year.
for this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
But just having that influence or that connectivity to all those people within the industry.
Yeah.
Um, and that's global. Do you find like globally, you have to be more careful when you're using humor?
I think so. It's interesting, right? Because like this is year 29, Speaker Spotlight, and as you mentioned, like the team, we've had very little turnover. So half of our teams been with the company 10 or more years. We know each other really well. So when you've got that comfort level and you know people, you can be more yourself and you can use humor a little bit more judiciously. I think when you're comfortable. Becoming president of the IASB, our board is made up of members from the US, Canada, the UK, Mexico, Spain. I don't think I'm missing anyone. So different cultures. And so I'm still getting to know them and they're getting to know me. But I feel like more and more the meetings are getting more and more fun, and
That's great.
and humor is universal. I mean, there's certain jokes and references that obviously are going to be better received in some contexts than others. But I think that we have a good time in these meetings, and we've got everybody's busy and it's a volunteer thing, and so everyone wants to get through the meeting quickly and get back to their day job. But at the same time, like we do actually have a lot of fun and a lot of laughs, and rightly or wrongly, I think probably I often will judge as the success of a meeting based on the amount of laughter. Depends what type of
Yes.
meeting, but if there is a bit of that, then I think you feel like the meeting's going better. People are engaged. It's a sign that people are kind of relaxed and paying attention and in tune with what's happening.
That is so great. I have to say, have you ever had like maybe trying to use humor and it just fails? And you're just like, oh, what do I do? Apologize now or just take a
Yeah,
little
definitely. I haven't had like any major fiascos. There was one joke I sort of made once, and I realized as soon as I said it that it wasn't probably the best joke. It wasn't like offensive, I don't think, to anyone, but it
Yeah.
was just like, oh, like you just sort of felt the air go out of the balloon as soon as you said it, and I think I just said sorry, that was not funny, and just sort of kept going. But obviously you need to be really careful, especially now, especially and just I think most people it's fine. Like it's not like someone's like, oh, I better cut out all of those like racist jokes or anti-Semitic
Yeah.
jokes or whatever. Like
Yeah.
like most people, hopefully, like we work with anyway, or don't have that in their repertoire,
No.
so it's not a concern from that point of view. But you do have to be careful, and something that could seem completely innocuous and inoffensive to one person could be like upsetting to somebody else. And it's you do have to be a bit careful. But that's just not just with humor, with anything. I have a friend of mine recently told me that they had a meeting, and he's like the nicest person and a great leader. And at the end of a meeting, he made a comment, like a throwaway comment at the end. It's like, okay, guys, let's go out and kick some ass or kick some butt, I think is what he said. And he got a call from his HR person later saying that somebody in the meeting was triggered by his aggressive uh, language. And he's like, "What did I say?"
Wow.
And he's like, "Let's go out and kick some butt." And they said they felt that sort of almost violent. And I was like, wow, like I would never even think of that, but you just never
Yeah.
know. And so,
No, it's
um,
so true.
yeah, so you do have to be careful, but at the same time, you can't go too far the other way and be so careful to the point where like we're just
You're not
robots and we're
yourself.
not. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you have any advice for leaders who are hesitant in using humor?
I mean, the only advice I would say is context matters. So, how well do you know your team and your people, and how well do they know you? Because that is I think that is a factor. I think that I know for me, and maybe this is for a lot of leaders. I'm not sure, but often don't think about the fact like I don't think of myself as a leader, right? And so like I don't necessarily always appreciate the impact that my words can have on our team and so knowing that there's leadership brings a lot of responsibility with it, and so we are responsible to make sure that the people we work with feel safe and valued and so forth. So I think that you do need to be careful because trust it takes a long time to build and you can lose it very quickly. um, but I would also say that you do have to be yourself, and I think that you know when the humor is directed at yourself to some degree, when you can be self-deprecating and not take yourself too seriously, that is that I think is the key, because I would never make fun of anybody else, but I would be look for opportunities almost to make fun of myself. And I think when you poke fun at yourself, that's probably one of the best and maybe safest ways in some ways of using humor, because if you can laugh at yourself, then hopefully other people can laugh too.
I that is so perfect, like, honestly. And you know what? It's so interesting because I do with you guys, you book me to speak on humor and bringing levity into the workplace. And one of the first things I start with is take your work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously because the
Mhm.
first is imperative and the second disastrous.
Yeah.
And
Well, I don't know if you
it's
know
so
this, Kate,
true.
but yeah, I don't know if you know this. We have 6 core values and beliefs for our company, right? And one of the 6 is literally we take work seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And it's so important. It's like we take what we do really seriously. Like
Yeah.
we're not curing cancer or operating, provide, we're not brain surgeons. Like but we do have an important role to play within the events industry and with our clients, and we take that responsibility really seriously. We want to make sure, obviously, we do the absolute best job we possibly can, but that doesn't mean you take yourself too seriously. And I mean, I had a client years ago. It's really interesting. I'll leave the names out, but they had narrowed down their choice of speakers to 2 speakers, and they were both very prominent, high profile, well known people. And one was through RH, and and they had a new president at this organization, and so my contact there, who I'd known for years and worked with, said, "I'm really sorry to do this, but our new president is like really wants to make sure he picks the right person. And he asked if the speaker that you represent would be willing to hop on a 10-15 minute call with him just to talk about the event and um, see if it's a good fit." So I said, "I don't know, normally they don't do pre-booking calls, but let me ask, I'll see." So I reached out to that speaker and he was like, "Yeah, sure, I'm happy to do it." And so we set up the call and they had the call. And then a few days later, my client called me back and said, "Okay, great news. The call went really well and we're going ahead with your speaker. But I got to tell you what happened with the other speaker." And so we called the other agency and basically asked the same question we asked of you. And the person there said, "Look, so and so is a really busy person. So either book him or don't book him, but don't waste my time. He doesn't have time to talk to you." And I was like, "You've
Wow.
got to be kidding." And to me, that was an example of someone who's just taking themselves way too seriously, thinking that because they represent someone who might be a high a high profile person, that somehow that makes them like so important. Like they're sort of like putting themselves on that level, and
Yeah.
so and the thing is, like, maybe that other speaker didn't want to do a call, which is fine, and they could just say, "Hey, you know what? Unfortunately, he can't do it. He would love to, but it's just too many other
Yes.
obligations," or maybe even humor the client and say, let me check. And then you don't check, but then you call back later and go, yeah, I checked. Unfortunately, can't do it. But to be that arrogant and to take
Yes.
yourself so seriously is just weird to me. And again,
Yeah.
I don't, if it's like, if I'm going in, hopefully this won't happen, at least not anytime soon, but if I was going in for like heart surgery or brain surgery or something, I don't know if I want my heart surgeon joking around nonstop. But on the other hand, yeah. But on the other hand, maybe it
Yeah.
wouldn't be a bad thing. Like if they were sort of like, making me feel comfortable and like, hey, I do this every day and we're gonna be fine.
Yeah.
Maybe, like it's a serious thing, but even in a very serious situation like that,
Yes.
sometimes a little bit of humor is helpful. I mean, I think that the funeral
Absolutely.
industry is known for as
Their
a
sense of
speaker,
humor.
every speaker we've ever had speak, yeah, to
Yes.
always say those are great audiences. They really love to laugh
Yeah.
and have a good time, and it's because they're doing such like heavy work all the time that they need that outlet. But there's a time and a place for everything. But I think that in almost every situation there can be a time and place for humor. It just needs to obviously be appropriate and empathetic to whoever you're dealing with.
And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, and I know you don't think of yourself as a leader, but being, the founder of Speaker Spotlight and using self-deprecating humor, because they say if you're, the CEO or the CFO, if you're in the C-suite, you're never to punch down, you always punch up.
Hmm.
Right. So you can make fun of someone above you, but, we try not to make fun of people below us because they're going to maybe feel
Absolutely.
bad.
Yeah.
But I think it's so prevalent to your leadership style that you can, see the humor in yourself in those situations. And I think it is, people I know just from having advanced calls of clients I want them to look good and I want to look good. If it's
Hmm.
not a good fit, neither one of us are going to look good. And I think that's
Exactly.
even more detrimental to what we're all trying to do, which is create impactful events for people.
100%. And we're lucky we get to work in an industry that is a fun industry, right? Like
Yeah.
it's also serious, and there's obviously learning objectives and organizational goals that go along with having these events. But I think at the end of the day, people want to have fun, they want to enjoy themselves. And I've always been a big believer, like in the speaker world, that like if people are laughing, they're more likely learning. Like the two things are
Yes.
not mutually exclusive, right? Like they actually go very
Absolutely.
much hand in hand. And even some of the most serious speakers of the most serious topics, um, I've seen use humor effectively, and it just kind of takes the edge off of it a little bit. So
Yeah.
it's such a great tool. If have it again, not everyone's a stand-up comedian, nor should they try to be, but there's
No.
always opportunities, I think, to find humor, and very often that's being self-deprecating and sort of sharing some maybe more vulnerable moments or some silly things that have happened that make you more human, whether it's as a speaker on stage or as a leader with your people. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what it is. It's all about connection, and the better we can connect with one another, the more likely we are to be heard.
Yeah, humor really does bring us together,
Yeah.
you can go back on those funny moments that have happened on your team building days and talk about those and everyone's right back at that moment.
Yeah.
It really is so inclusive.
Yeah, I mean, we have some inside jokes. I'm just thinking in the office, like there's a plum pudding joke, which I will not get into, but there's about six people on our team where if I just say the word plum pudding, they will probably have a laugh attack and know exactly what I'm talking about. Just
That's
silliness, right?
perfect.
Yeah, it's just like silly things that have happened where you can just have a laugh. And we've had we had a situation once where a couple people from the office went to see another very prominent speaker speak who kind of messed up, had all the right information, but somehow went to the wrong venue. Thankfully, arrived at the hotel where they were supposed to be speaking with minutes to spare. Was quite stressed out. Was in the women's washroom just beforehand, fixing up her hair, I guess, and getting ready to go on, and sort of like reaming our people out. It wasn't our fault, but basically saying, "What kind of operation are you guys running over there?" And at that point, not realizing that the mistake was actually hers and not ours. And then one of the people, there were two of them that were there, and they're both young people, like probably in their late 20s, and it was a little bit of a scary situation. But at one point, as this person was sort of teasing her hair, just like said, "Well, your hair looks great," and apparently the speaker just burst out laughing at that moment, and then went on stage and did a great job. But it can definitely be a stress reliever and help alleviate a little bit of a situation that could be a little bit stressful. So
Oh my,
you
and
never know.
yes, and sometimes it puts you back in your. I was at a speaking event a couple weeks ago, and I had this great show. I get off stage, I sit down at my book table, and my pants split open, and I was like, "Well,
Can't make
it
this
was."
stuff up, right?
You
You just got to
can't
go
make
with
this stuff up. I was like, I'm not that important. And now I can't get up. I'm going to have
it.
to wait for everyone to leave. Yeah, no, it was good times. Good
Ooh,
times.
yeah.
Oh my gosh. I have to say, like, this has just been so enjoyable. Are there any, like, special techniques or anything that you can tell people about that you use? Or, do you have like someone plan your days, or you're always like, no, we got to do this? Or,
Um, so I've never had like an EA. I kind of like to control my own calendar, and
yeah.
and uh, so I mean, my days are planned in the sense that like I usually have a series of meetings and things happening, but also I try to leave enough room in there just to like be able to think sometimes, or just obviously things happen, and to be able to, whether it's putting out fires or answering questions, or working with a speaker or client or someone on our team. Um, but I do find that as I age a little bit, and it's been almost 30 years since we started doing this, so which I
Yeah.
cannot believe. Um, I definitely feel like, mornings for me, even though I'm not a morning person, I find like meetings in the mornings are often better. The 9:30 meeting often just people have a little bit more energy and stuff than, having like the 4 o'clock, 4:30 meetings where I think sometimes people are just like exhausted by the time they get to that point. And they've made a million decisions that day and sent out 200 emails, and so just planning things. Mornings I think are good times to do things like meetings, especially if there's decisions need to be made. But if you're doing something in the afternoon, definitely like trying to start off meetings with like sometimes just a funny story, not coming from me, but just like from someone on the
Yeah.
team, or just something to like lighten the mood, because it's everyone's busy, right? And sometimes we're just going from call to call, meeting to meeting, email to email, and just being able to break that sort of
That
um
monotony
yeah,
or
and just kind of
intensity, really. Yeah.
yeah, it might take a minute or two at the beginning of the meeting, but I think it's well worth
Yeah.
the time. So yeah,
But it's a
thanks for
lot of
taking
fun, and just but yeah, opening up your meetings like that. I'm way more creative in the morning for sure. It's
it. Yeah,
just yeah, if I get up and I just start writing, it's way better for me than if it's late in the day and I'm sort of sleepy. And
yeah.
and I
It's
always
interesting though,
like being
because
the
comedy.
opening.
Yeah, it's funny because comedy is typically something done at night, like in terms of stand up, right?
Yes.
Like that, you associate it as like an evening activity, and like I
Yes.
have this used to have this vision of, or this perception that comedians like never wake up before noon, and and which may or may not be true for some of them.
A lot
Although
of
the
them
ones that
don't,
we
but
work,
yeah.
yeah, but the ones that we work and the ones that speak are usually like the ones who are actually early risers and are up early,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, right? Especially like we've been lucky to work with a lot of great comedians who some
Yeah.
also speak, or some just do comedy, and get to know some of them, and what their habits are. And it is amazing how professional, like the good ones, how seriously they take their craft, which
Yeah.
is making people laugh, but it's like serious business to them in terms of like how they prepare and everything else. I remember when we started working with Derek Edwards, who to me is just one of the great comedians
Greatest.
in
Yeah.
Canada. Yeah. And he kind of has this persona, right, of being a little bit out of it, and kind of,
Yes.
and yet like nobody takes it more seriously than him in terms of like,
A
his
word.
preparation, and like just, yeah. It's, so it is so interesting how there's the persona that people have on stage, whether they're a comedian or a speaker, or, a leader in front of their people. And then, and who that person is sort of behind the scenes. It's, there can be this like interesting contrast between someone who, may come across as very funny and loosey goosey and spontaneous, but also like plans everything. And so it's some people are just like off the cuff. I mean, other people do plan things, I think, quite meticulously.
Yeah, do the work and then you can forget the work you've done. You can make it look easy.
Right, right.
Right? So it's
Yeah.
pretty so for the last part of this, I have to ask
Mhm.
you, what
Yeah.
is the funniest thing that's ever happened to you?
Okay. So
I know everyone's
So
like,
this is, you know, so this is the other thing you asked. So, for
yeah.
those of you who are listening, like we didn't rehearse all these questions, but there's two things that Kate said. She said, I'm going to ask you what your favorite joke is and funniest thing that happened to you. And so, it's funny. Like, I feel like I've had a lot of funny things happen to me in my life. I feel like a day doesn't go by where I don't at least have a few good laughs. And, I was sitting there racking my brain and I go over to Farah, like we've been married for almost 30 years and have known each other for longer than that. And I'm like, what's the funniest thing that's ever happened to me? Because I can't think of anything now. And she's like, I don't know. She's thinking about it. So I'm going to tell you a really quick story. It's not really the funniest thing that ever happened to me, I say, but it's kind of like one of my favorite stories because I think it's funny. And
Yeah.
part of the reason that it's funny or ironic maybe is it has to do with a barber shop, which I think in
Already
and of
funny.
itself makes this fun, kind of fun. So when I was a little kid, we lived in a small apartment. My sister and I shared a bedroom. It was just my parents and the two of us, and so we lived there till I was 8 years old. And there was a barber shop around the corner from where we lived. So that's where I got like my first ever haircut. And when I was a little kid, like I had a nice, big, thick, had a nice brown hair, and and it would grow quickly. So I, go to the barber shop and I get my hair cut there, and it was like a sort of middle-aged Greek gentleman who ran the shop. A really nice man. His name was Nick, which it seems like a stereotype, like a joke, but his name is Nick, and and so he would cut my hair, and he was my barber, and it was probably back in those days it was like $2 a cut or whatever, and so that happened until I was 8 years old, and then we moved. Okay, but when I went to the barber shop, so I was a really quiet kid, right? Like always, even all through school, I was never one to put my hand up and ask questions. I was very shy, and still to this day am quite shy in certain situations. So when I first went in there to get my hair cut, when I was like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years old or something, they asked me what my name was, and I said it's Martin. But the way I said Martin, they thought I said Mark. So they said, okay, Mark. And so they called me Mark. Okay. So whenever I go into the barber shop, they'd be like, hey, Mark, how are you today? And I was too like embarrassed to correct them because I didn't correct them in the first place. So they called me Mark. Okay. Until I was 8 years old. And then I moved. Okay. So fast forward like 15 years and I moved back into the neighborhood that I originally grew up in. Okay. And I'm now like 23 years old. I finished law school. I am, starting my career. And I'm like, okay, move back to this neighborhood. Maybe I should find a place to get my hair cut. I still had a pretty good head of hair at this point. So I go into the barber shop thinking like, yeah, you know what? It's right here. I'll go back there. This will be kind of fun. It felt nostalgic. I don't think I'd been set foot in that barber shop since I was 8 years old. So I go in, and the guy is still working there, Nick. I recognize him. He was probably
Wow.
like in his 40s when I was a kid, and now he's probably like in his 60s or something. And I walk in, and he looks at me, and he says, "You look familiar. Have you been here before?" And I said, yeah, but it was a really long time ago. You wouldn't remember me. I was a little kid. He goes, is your name Mark? Well,
Did you
what am I
correct him?
supposed to do? Yeah. So what am I supposed to do? Like say, no, you got me confused with someone else?
Yeah.
Or say, actually, it's not, but I know what you're saying that because, that's what you
Yeah.
do. So I just said, yeah.
Yeah.
So I go in there and
I think that's
so
great.
I go in there and then I'd be going there, like every, I don't know, month or two, however often I got my hair cut.
Yeah.
And I walked in, hey, Mark, how are you? And then a friend of mine was there one day when I went in, and after he's, why are they calling you Mark? And I'm like, don't ask. It's a long story. But
I
I just
love
thought
that.
yeah, that was kind of fun. Like when that happened, I was just like, I don't know. I felt like I was on like some kind of Seinfeld episode or something. It was just too weird. And
Yes.
so, and
Yeah.
now my son I'd take him there when he was younger. I'd take him there to get his hair cut, and then I had to explain to my son why they call me Mark. It's really bad.
Did he laugh? Did he get it?
Oh, he thought it was hilarious. He actually wanted to start calling me Mark, but I told him he can't.
I love that.
Yeah. Anyway,
oh my gosh, that's a great story. I love
Yeah.
it. That's very funny. Especially coming, as a grown man, just going, yeah, it's Mark. So all of a sudden you're 8 again.
You are. And I couldn't believe, I don't know how he could have recognized me. Like, seriously, if you saw someone at 8 and then at 23, I
Amazing.
don't understand. It took him all of 2 seconds. Like, maybe it's because, when you're cutting someone's hair, you intimately get to know their head or something.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Anyway,
that is a great story.
Anyway, that's my story. I'm sure there's funnier things that have happened to me, but that's kind of my
I think that's a great story. Honestly, I cannot thank you enough for spending this hour or 45 minutes with me. I know how busy you are. I know how many people, want to spend time with you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to come on Humor in the C-Suite. And you know what? I think it gives everyone a real sort of insider's view into what people and leaders are thinking, because so often we're like, oh, we can't be our authentic selves around them and bring that, to work. And I think it's good for people to know that they can be themselves and, all those, and that laughter does create a better work culture. And that's what we're trying to do.
I agree with you more. And this was a lot of fun. It was a great break from my day. And